Chapter 61 Jino's Doubts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Luthor Factory, Sublevel 1, Bizarro, looking like a zombie, trailed Lex, grinning and repeating, "Father." The big goof seemed perpetually cheerful, oblivious to Lex's darkening mood as he shouted and smiled. After some coaching, Bizarro had picked up basic vocabulary. "Shut it, Bizarro. Corner, now." Lex snapped. "Okay," Bizarro mumbled, scratching his head, puzzled by his father's anger. He shuffled to the corner, counting, 1, 2, 3. "So, why, father?" Jino asked, lounging on the couch. Lex sighed. "Those morons told B0 whoever created him is his father." Jino grinned. "Congrats, Pops. You're a dad." "Does Victoria know?" Lex glared. "Shut your trap, Jino." Their daily brotherly squabbles were interrupted when a security guard approached Jino. The man bowed respectfully. "Mr. Jino, the guard at the gate says your classmate Chloe is here." "Chloe?" Jino sat up, rubbing his cheek, curious. What was she doing here? Worried about his absence from class. He sighed inwardly. "Let her in," he told the guard. Chloe entered the massive Luthor factory. Whether by design or accident, the factory resembled a nuclear plant, with towering smokestacks belching black smoke. She stared blankly at the chimneys, lost in thought. Her dad was a workshop director here. Tap. A gentle touch on her shoulder. Chloe tensed, startled. She turned to face a pair of pure blue eyes. "Gino?" She stammered, backing away from those piercing eyes. For some reason, they seemed bluer, more intense than she remembered. "You okay?" Jino grinned, waving a hand in front of her face. "Something in my eyes?" No, just, your eyes are really blue." Chloe looked away, flustered. The setting sun cast a golden glow on her blonde bob. "Ah, probably just the light," Jino said casually. "Not quite." His eyes were tinged blue from practicing his freezing beams. "Right, the light." Chloe clutched the textbook to her chest, looking at Jino. "Finals are next week. You need to study. I marked the important stuff in your book." Jino listened patiently, nodding occasionally. Ring. A phone interrupted them. Pete's frantic voice blared from the speaker. "Jino." Clark collapsed. Chloe perked up, listening. "Clark collapsed." Jino repeated, surprised. They exchanged a look. "Okay, be right there." Jino hung up and turned to Chloe. "Chloe, come to the hospital with me." Clark passed out. Jino arrived at the small-town hospital again, feeling like a regular. The sharp smell of disinfectant triggered a wave of déjà vu. 13 years ago, he and Lex had started their new lives here. Jino opened the ward door with Chloe. Clark lay still on the white hospital bed, eyes closed, breathing steadily. He seemed okay. "What happened?" Jino asked Peter, who pursed his lips and recounted the story. "Infected factory workers." Jino frowned. "I wasn't aware of that. When Earl was kicked out 10 years ago, he and his mother visited some mysterious magicians, but it was definitely something Lionel would do." He frowned, thinking of something else. Based on Pete's description of Earl's reaction, he might have been affected by kryptonite, leading him to accuse Lionel. That would confirm his father secretly researched kryptonite a decade ago, but why hadn't Lionel ever mentioned this? What was he hiding? A shadow fell over Jino's mood, but his expression remained neutral. He smiled. "Where's Earl now?" He wanted to ask him some questions in person. How had Earl become like this? Was it the kryptonite? What did he see at the chemical plant? Jino needed answers. Peter scratched his head. "Next ward over. He's handcuffed to the bed." Tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock ticked rhythmically. The smell of disinfectant mingled with the sharp tang of steel. In the dim ward, Earl slowly opened his eyes. His first instinct in the unfamiliar environment was to observe. He instinctively tried to sit up. Clang! The cold sound of chains echoed in his ears. He turned his head to see his arms handcuffed to the headboard. Who? Earl panted, clenching his fists. Had he been caught? Knock, knock. A knock at the door. Before Earl could respond, the door opened to reveal a tall, blond young man with blue eyes, staring at him without expression, dressed casually in a white tee, black shorts, and sneakers. The boy casually walked toward Earl. Who are you? Confronted by the stranger, Earl nervously swallowed and stared. Confused thoughts swirled through his mind. Who was this person? What did he want? Was he a hitman sent by Lionel? Earl used to work at Luthor Corp and had heard whispers about the ZIS disappearing people technique. The girl in the iron bucket under Wall Street knew all about it. Earl's Skeena, right? Ignoring the question, Jino focused on the black man on the hospital bed. He stood before him, indifferent. I need to ask you some questions. You used to work at the chemical plant. What happened to you there? Earl didn't answer, but scrutinized him warily. Who are you? Right, sorry, Jino said, sighing, reaching up to pat his head as if annoyed at his forgetfulness. Staring into the black man's eyes, he placed a hand on his chest, enunciating. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jino. Jino Luthor. The black man's eyes widened at the name. Chapter 62 Remarks on the Launch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Okay, wow, that hit the shelves fast. First off, huge thanks to my editor, Ching Huju, for always being in this book's corner. Also, wishing everyone a prosperous, lucky, and healthy 2024, filled with family harmony. Now, about this book, honestly, I'm not sweating the performance too much. What I really want is for readers to dig what I'm writing, and for me to write what I want, at my own pace. I'm talking about Lex Luthor, who's fiercely loyal to his brothers but keeps that tough exterior. Clark, all youthful energy and passion. Jino, pouring all his power into himself while still looking out for his friends. I'd rather spend time exploring the love and rivalries between these characters, using that as fuel to keep the story moving. So, let's talk about where this book is headed and answer some common questions. 1. Will the protagonist stick strictly to the Smallville plot? Answer, nope. It's inspired by Smallville. I'll be skipping over some of the duller prequel storylines and throwing in some awesome tales from other DC superheroes and main characters. I keep wondering, if a protagonist like this actually existed in the DC universe, how would Batman, Mr. Trust No One, react? And wouldn't it be funny to see how helpless the villains become when they're faced with a protagonist of this level? Later on, when our guy copies the double Kryptonian panel, he'll unlock the ability to jump outside the DC timeline. This might take a while to develop, but get ready for the protagonist to leave the DC universe entirely, level up, and generally cause chaos in other universes, too. About the love interests, okay, here's the deal. I'm planning for 3 main female characters, give or take. First, someone to manage things for the protagonist, help them with their powers and stuff. Second, a badass, beautiful woman who can fight alongside the protagonist. Third, a woman with serious charisma who stirs up drama between the other love interests. Maybe. Let's be real, a pretty face without substance is just a damsel in distress, and a love interest with zero presence is just going to annoy people. As for other women, they're likely going to be supporting characters, so, the main female characters must have these qualities. Point 1. Intelligence to assist the protagonist. 2. Beauty, of course. 3. Loyalty. Above all, if any female readers out there think they fit the bill, leave a comment. I'll consider you for the role. Alright, enough chit-chat. Let's talk updates. Okay, here's the deal. I'm setting up a challenge. From the release of the first chapter until this same time tomorrow, I'll add 1 chapter for every 500 new subscriptions. That's it. We're posting 4 chapters today, and the 2 top donors get 2 more. Peace out. Chapter 63 Reporting Results. You are listening at novelfull.audio. From 11 a.m. yesterday to 11 a.m. today, we got 2,567 new subscriptions, which means about 5 extra chapters. Let's get those guaranteed 4 chapters out today, and then I'll catch up on the rest. Also, it looks like my laptop's network card is fried. I'll grab a new one this afternoon and see if that fixes it. After that, I'll organize all the Gotham story info. We're almost done with Superman Season 1. I'll wrap up a few more plot points and then we'll move on to Gotham for some real mayhem. Chapter 64 Dispute and Escape. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The clock kept ticking, but in his hospital bed, Earl's heart was a storm of fear, panic and helplessness flooded him, freezing him in place, eyes wide, lips parted, but unable to make a sound. The name Luthor hammered in his head. It had taken over his life. His current mess was all thanks to that name. Earl had fantasized about punching a Luthor in the face, but Jino just stood there, blue eyes fixed on him. He didn't know what was happening. Jino's gaze filled him with pure dread. His DNA screamed at him to run, to scream, as if a monster, a white tiger, stood at the foot of his bed, not a man. This is insane. Earl swallowed, fear battling his will as he clenched his fists. Are you a Luthor? I asked you a question. Jino's voice was sharp, a dark blue light sparking in his eyes. The air seemed to drop 10 degrees. Earl stared in horror at his arms, covered in goosebumps. Answer me, what was Lionel doing at the chemical plant 10 years ago? Jino had always hated his father, that ambitious snake. He hadn't even bothered to show up at his grandfather's funeral. He figured Lionel would sell his own soul for the right price. Earl fought down his terror, his voice shaking. You're a Luthor. Luthors are all liars. Okay, your choice. Jino wasn't about to waste time with this guy. He'd freeze him solid and haul him back to the base for questioning. Jino, the door crashed open, stopping Jino in his tracks. Clark burst in, his face etched with worry. He checked the bed, then turned to Jino, his face blank, and Earl, frozen in terror. Clark sighed in relief. It looked like his friend hadn't killed anyone yet. Jino, listen, there's a misunderstanding. Clark stepped toward Jino, meeting his blue eyes, then pausing, confused. Had Jino's eyes gotten brighter since the last time he saw him? Clark. Jino glanced at him. I'm just going to ask him what he saw at the Luthor plant. I might be able to help him, if necessary. Not a total lie. Finding out what Lionel was up to at the factory was more important than offing Earl. You're right. Clark smiled. It was good to see that rare soft side of Jino. He turned to Earl. Earl, Jino's my friend. He's a good guy. Clark spoke with total sincerity. You can trust him. That should do it, right? Earl should believe him, but Earl just scowled, his face twisted with resentment. No way. The Luthors are all bad news. Clark, he's got you fooled. Earl was a mess, shaking like a leaf. He felt betrayed. Snap, star, here we go again. Earl's body seized up, shaking violently, breaking the handcuffs with hardly any effort. He's running. Jino didn't hesitate. Pure blue light blasted from his eyes. Wait, Clark's face went white. He threw himself in front of Earl. Clark raised his arms, thwack, star, the turquoise light slammed into Clark's arm, buzz, star, blue light slowly coated Clark's arm. Clark frowned, confusion and pain etched on his face. It hurts. Frost raced across his plaid shirt, a biting pain making Clark wince, buzz, more freezing rays hammered Clark's arm. The frost turned to crystal clear ice, covering his entire arm in seconds. Earl, saved by Clark's move, was no longer shaking. He sized up the situation, and his eyes landed on the window behind him. Crash, star. He dove headfirst through the glass, leaping out of the second-story window. Jino, Chloe and Peter arrived to see blue beams blasting Clark. Buzz, star. The heavy sky blue beam pushed Clark back, pinning him against the wall. He ducked his head, raising his arms to block the light. He couldn't move. His dad's friends were right behind him. Soon, Clark's lower body was encased in ice. Jino, stop. What are you doing? Chloe lunged forward, grabbing Jino's arm, trying to stop him. Whoosh. Jino slowly exhaled a cloud of cold air. Chloe's voice snapped him back. He cut off the freezing light. The ward was filled with icy mist, the air thick with cold. In the corner, half of Clark's body was trapped in the ice. His thick eyebrows were covered with frost. He shivered uncontrollably from the cold. Clark struggled to open his ice-coated eyelids, trying to free his legs, but he couldn't move an inch. Helpless, he looked at Jino, arms raised, and said, "Jino, there's been a misunderstanding." "Clark." Jino's voice was tight with anger. "That guy got away. He's a murderer. And you just let him go. Have you forgotten about Gray?" Jino stared at Clark, his face filled with disappointment. He turned and left. He needed to find Earl. The tension in the room broke the moment Jino was gone. In the corner, Peter, who'd been holding his breath, gulped in the icy air, wrapping his arms around himself. "This is insane. Jino can shoot ice rays from his eyes." He turned to Clark, still frozen in place, and grinned. "Hey Clark, can you shoot lasers from your eyes too?" Clark didn't answer. He focused, trying to feel the energy, but there was nothing. He shook his head with a wry smile. "No, I can't." He looked at the ice shards on the floor, a worried expression on his face. Jino was getting stronger, fast. Did it have something to do with his disappearance these last few days? What about that chemical plant? He pushed the questions aside, forcing a smile. "Now, someone get a shovel and get me out of here. It's freezing." Chapter 65 The Soft-Hearted God. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Night, Kent Farm. Inside the cabin, Clark, wrapped in a blanket, had just showered, his wet hair clinging to his forehead. He dabbed at his runny nose with a tissue. "I can't believe this." Jonathan and Martha stood before him, their expressions stern. Martha, arms crossed, looked at him with worry. "Clark, what am I supposed to say? We're gone for a day, and you're mixed up in a murder case." They'd left for a vacation in Metropolis that morning, but before they could enjoy their honeymoon, they got a call from Pete about Clark fainting. That messed up their plans big time. They rushed back. Jonathan sighed, rubbed his chin, handed Clark a tissue, and quipped, "I didn't think my kid even got sick." Clark sniffled, embarrassed. He remembered the scene at the hospital. After Jino left, Chloe and Pete couldn't break the ice, even with tools. So Clark had to smash it with his bare hands in 30 seconds to get out, but 30 seconds is a long time for Superman. He could throw thousands of punches in that time. Then the cops, who were waiting at the hospital, heard Earl escaped and hauled Clark and the others down to the station for questioning. Jonathan and Martha showed up just in time to keep Clark from spending the night in a cell. Jino's power, exploding at the hospital, flashed in his mind, and Clark's head throbbed again. Jino was getting stronger, fast. If he really wanted to kill Earl, Clark didn't know how he could stop him. "Okay, Clark, get some rest tonight." Martha ruffled his hair, then headed for the kitchen. "I'll make you some ginger tea. It's good for a cold." Jonathan patted him on the shoulder and went upstairs to change. After they left, Clark's eyes darted around. In a flash, he bolted out the door and towards the barn. He ran to the second floor. In the abandoned hayloft, a black man lay on a wooden board. Earl, scared of getting caught after escaping the hospital, had holed up there. "Aha!" Earl wasn't surprised to see Clark. Instead, he pleaded, "Clark, please help me." He said pathetically, "You've seen it yourself, the Luthor kids are freaks. Lionel must be up to something." Clark listened silently, feeling a twinge of doubt. Earl was right. Jino's strength was definitely weird. Earl continued his sob story. "I was sent to clean the 3rd floor of the Luthor chemical plant. They were using those green rocks from around town for secret experiments. That stuff can be made into fertilizer to help plants grow. I fell into the crops and some of the rocks pierced my skin." Earl stretched out a trembling hand and wiped sweat from his forehead. His pitiful state tugged at Clark's heart. He knew how Earl felt. Kryptonite made him weak too. Earl saw the pity in Clark's eyes and seized the opportunity. He grabbed Clark's arm. "Clark, before this happened, I had a great family, a beautiful wife, and wonderful kids. But the accident ruined everything. My wife divorced me, and the judge gave her custody." Tears streamed down Earl's face as he clutched Clark's arm. I just want to be normal again, so I can take care of my family. Earl. Clark hesitated, but looking at Earl, writhing from the effects of kryptonite, his resolve hardened. How can I help you? Earl's face lit up. He wiped his tears and said urgently, the secret to getting me back to normal is on the 3rd floor of the Luthor chemical plant. Luthor chemical plant? Clark frowned. He remembered the school was planning a field trip to Luthor Corp tomorrow. I know, Earl. Clark patted him on the shoulder and looked him in the eye. I'll take care of it. I'll help you. At the same time, he made his promise to Earl. Luthor Castle. A gust of wind swept across the usually tranquil pasture, making the grass dance. Aha! Like a gust of wind himself, Jino appeared in the hall as if from nowhere. Master. The blonde maid brought him milk. Jino took a sip to moisten his dry lips, his eyes gleaming. I've searched practically the whole town, but there's no sign of the black man. Where did he go? Jino leaned back on the sofa, tapping the armrest. Wait, there was one place he hadn't checked yet, the Kent's farm. After their run-in that evening, Jino didn't want to just barge into the Kent farm and make things even more awkward between him and Clark. But... Jino shifted, propping his chin on his hand. Clark wouldn't be stupid enough to believe a murderer, would he? As night deepened, Jino decided to stop worrying and headed back to his room. He booted up his computer, and a message popped up. It was from Tina, the spy he'd planted to keep tabs on Talia. Tina, things are normal at the League of Assassins. But I heard a guy named Booth passed the Lei Xiaogu trial and graduated. He turned down their offer to join the League. Jino's eyes lingered on Booth's name. He passed the League's trial and refused recruitment. Could this be Bruce Wayne using an alias? He tapped the keyboard and simply replied, I understand. Ding dong. The message was sent. Meanwhile, far away in a dark room on Alcatraz Island, Tina stood helplessly behind the computer, watching Talia type with an amused, evil smile. Talia's youthful face was full of mockery. She glanced at Tina, who looked like a frightened cat, in the reflection of the screen and said, Don't be nervous, Tina. I just told the truth for you. He won't find out. Tina nodded, her eyes full of misery. Right after meeting Talia, the woman had used Veritasium to learn the purpose of her visit, but for some reason, Talia hadn't imprisoned her, instead allowing her to stay. Tina sighed. When would this crazy double-agent life end? Thanks to reader 1455147177274122224 for the 100-point reward Epsilon. Chapter 66 Annoyed Clark, additional update for the boss with tale number 12224. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The early morning sun glinted off the yellow school bus. Ugh, I hate these field trips to Luthor Chemical. Chloe frowned, her reflection mirroring her unhappiness in the window. Peter, in the next seat, smirked, probably 'cause her dad works in a chemical plant, too. Like father, like show-off daughter, am I right? Shut up, Pete, they bickered, but Peter was surprised that Clark was silent, staring intently at the bus's metal floor. Lost in thought, Peter waved a hand in front of Clark's face. Clark. Earth to Clark. What's up? Huh? Clark startled, licking his lips. Nothing. Just thinking. Unseen by the others, a black man named Earl was crammed into the luggage compartment beneath the bus, his face tight with worry. Welcome to Luthor Chemical. A middle-aged man in a suit puffed out his chest, clutching a folder and beaming at the visiting students. Clark, Chloe, Pete, Lana, and her ex, Whitney, were among them. The man smiled. I'm Gabe Sullivan, the plant manager, and a proud father. Right, Chloe? Chloe, feeling everyone's eyes on her, gave an awkward smile. Right, Dad. Before Gabe could say more, a group of people surrounded Lex Luthor and headed toward the elevator. Mr. Luthor. Gabe abandoned the students. Oh. Student tour day. Lex paused, glanced at Clark, and a smile touched his lips. Gabe, why don't I show them around? He was clearly curious about Clark's abilities. With the big boss offering, Gabe readily agreed. Lex turned to his assistant. Lena, round them up and get them on the elevator. I'll meet you on the 4th floor. Alright, everyone, Lex's assistant said flatly. All electronics go in the storage bins. No photos, no wandering off. Ma'am, Clark saw an opportunity. I heard this place used to have a 3rd floor. Is that true? The assistant shook her head. Rumor. Doesn't exist. Okay, everyone, this way. We'll take the stairs. The group followed the assistant toward the elevator. Soon after they left, Earl pried open the storage room's iron door and slipped into an emergency exit. He navigated a maze of pipe-filled corridors and rusty stairs. Finally, he reached the door to the 3rd floor. Phew. He took a deep breath and turned the knob. Click. The iron door swung open, revealing a small storage closet. No. No way. Earl exploded with emotion. He burst into the room and frantically searched, but there was nothing but bare walls and a metal frame. This can't be happening. His last hope crushed. Earl's eyes burned red as he pounded the wall. His future, his dreams, were gone. Lost in despair, Earl refused to accept it. No, he muttered. There has to be a 3rd floor. His hand went to his jacket pocket. He gripped a dark, American-made pistol. His eyes glazed over as he stroked the weapon. Click. He chambered around, and a broken smile twisted his lips. No, there's still hope. They've got to be hiding it. On the 4th floor, the students, notebooks in hand, were gathered in a large office. Sophisticated equipment lined the walls, and scientists in lab coats monitored computer screens. Welcome to Luthor Corp, Lex said, hands clasped behind his back. This is the factory's command center. We process 100,000 tons of animal waste here every year. He grinned, baring his teeth. Hope nobody's got any flammable materials on them, or we'll all go sky high. Nervous laughter rippled through the group, but Clark's face was grim. He was worried about Earl. Crash. The sound of metal shattering cut off Lex's spiel. The bald CEO frowned at Gabe. Manager, go see what that was. Gabe hurried toward the source of the noise, a locked iron door. Bang. Before he could reach it, the door burst open. A towering black man with a wild look in his eyes grabbed Gabe by the neck, shoving a gun against his temple. Gabe barely reacted before he was subdued. The students panicked. Chloe screamed, "Dad!" Realization dawned. They were being held hostage. Some of the girls burst into tears. Clark roared, "Earl, what are you doing?" Regret nodded him. He shouldn't have gotten involved. He had to fix this. He tensed, his body preparing to move faster than thought. Everything seemed to slow. He charged toward Earl, reaching for the gun. Snap. The instant he made contact, a blinding green light erupted from Earl. Ack. Clark cried out as Earl easily shoved him away. Thud. Clark hit the floor hard, but in the chaos, no one noticed. Screams filled the air. Shut up. Earl bellowed, silencing the crowd. His voice, low and raspy, was directed at Gabe. You're the manager. You know where the 3rd floor is. Take me there. Or I'll put a bullet in your brain. He only wanted to get better, and he would easily sacrifice their lives. Dad. Chloe clenched her fists. She started to move toward her father, but Lex grabbed her wrist. Head for the emergency exit in the back. The code is 1017. Go to the sub-basement and find Jino. Go. Chloe swallowed her fear, nodded, and edged backward. Hey, Earl, right? Lex stepped forward, his bald head gleaming. If you're going to take a hostage to find the 3rd floor, why not grab someone important? Earl narrowed his eyes. Who are you? Lex puffed out his chest. Lex Luthor. I own this place. Chapter 67, Remember in the next life, don't mess with Luthor. Additional update for Noontime Boss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Luthors. The black man exploded. This is all because of the Luthors. He shoved Gabe aside and slammed Lex across the cheek with the butt of his gun. Bang! The force knocked Lex off his feet, the bald man hitting the floor, spitting blood. The blow had split his lip and bloodied his mouth. Perfect. Earl grinned savagely, pointing the gun at Lex's head. Take me to the entrance to the 3rd floor. Lex's cheek throbbed, his mind racing. He hadn't known there was a 3rd floor in the factory, but Earl was clearly losing it, on the verge of a meltdown. He needed to de-escalate the situation, fast. He needed to buy time, lure him to Keno's location. Lex's eyes flickered as he played weak. The 3rd floor's been evacuated. Then where is it now? Lex's confirmation just fueled Earl's paranoia. The damn Luthors had hidden the location. Spittle landed on Lex's bald head. Head bowed, Lex said, eyes narrowed. The 3rd floor's been moved to the basement, through the elevator. Too slow, not enough power. Bang! The sharp, quick fist connected with the pale, gaunt cheek. The zombie-like Bizarro crumpled onto the cold steel plate, clutching his face, looking up at Jino with hurt eyes. Uncle Jino, bad. Hearing Bizarro's mangled words, Jino sighed, rubbing his forehead. Shut up, Bizarro. Call me Jino. But. Jino ignored him, grabbing a water glass and taking a swig. Dee. A cold electronic beep echoed in the empty lab. Jino turned. Through the slowly rising blast door, he saw Chloe, standing anxiously outside, fists clenched, tears in her eyes. Chloe. Jino frowned, glancing at Bizarro. Back to your room. Bizarro obeyed, vanishing like a gust of wind. As soon as Bizarro was gone, Jino headed for the door. How does Chloe know the password to the underground base? Jino wondered. Did Lex tell her? Bang! He stabbed the closed door button, stopping the door before it revealed the secrets of the lab, then lunged out of the lab at top speed. Bang! The half-open door slammed shut. Chloe. Jino's voice was soft behind her. The girl jumped, startled by his sudden appearance, biting her lip. Then, as if she'd found a lifeline, she threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Jino, please, save my dad. What happened to your dad? Jino tried to pull away, but seeing her tears, his arms fell limp. Big tears soaked his shirt. He patted her back, asking as calmly as he could, tell me, so I can help. He knew Chloe's father was the factory manager, and it just dawned on him that the girl knew the lab password. A dark thought crossed his mind, confirmed by Chloe's next words. A murderer from Metropolis broke into the factory. He's holding the visiting students hostage, got a gun to my dad's head, and your brother's one of them. They're on the 4th floor now. Clark tried to stop Earl, but he got knocked down. Chloe rambled, then noticed Jino wasn't reacting. She looked up, worried, and saw a face as cold as ice. His blue eyes burned with murderous intent. He stood there, silent, lips tight. The silence pressed down on her like a mountain, silencing her. G.I. Jino. Chloe swore she'd never seen him like this. His handsome face was twisted with violent anger, barely contained. Crack, crack, crack. A sickening sound of cracking bones filled the air. As his fist clenched, Jino looked up. His gaze went through the concrete floor, past pipes and wires, settling on the elevator being lowered by a steel cable. Inside, a familiar face had a gun pointed at his head. The two locked in a tense conversation. Jino glanced at the elevator shaft, an idea forming. The elevator slowly descended. Earl's hands shook. Soon, he'd recover. Soon. Boom! A violent tremor rocked the elevator. What? Earl looked up, panicked. Something had jumped from the 2nd floor onto the elevator. He drew his gun, pointing it at the roof. Whatever you are, I'm warning you. I've got Lex Luthor. Boom! Another sharp sound, closer this time. Get away! Earl roared, pulling the trigger. Bang, bang, bang! .3 bullets sprayed from the muzzle, ricocheting off metal and disappearing into the darkness above. Silence. Dead? Is it dead? Earl breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he'd overreacted. Bang! Before he could relax, 5 slender fingers burst through the metal above his head. Tear, the hands tore open the metal easily, and Earl saw a pair of blue eyes glowing. Buzz, a cold beam hit Earl's right arm, freezing it instantly. My hand, Earl screamed. The freezing ray might sting Superman, but on Earl, it was like being stripped naked in the Arctic. Ice encased Earl's arm, the gun frozen solid. From a distance, it looked like some violent, abstract sculpture. Snap! Jino jumped down through the hole. He glanced at Lex, blood trickling from his mouth, a flicker of fury in his eyes. He turned to Earl, holding out his right hand, palm open. Earl's eyes widened. 3 flattened slugs lay in the palm of Jino's hand. How? Earl was dazed. He remembered the hospital, his eyes filled with terror. You're a devil. Bang! Earl's response was an iron grip on his chin. Crack! Jino crushed his jaw. Woo! Mixed with blood and broken teeth, Earl tried to speak, making only a garbled sound. Be good. Open wide. Jino smiled, shoving the bullets into Earl's mouth, then pinching his throat to make him swallow. Throwing things around isn't nice. Watching Earl gag, Jino looked thoughtful. He pointed at Lex. You punched my brother. Now I'm going to punch you. Fair? Earl shook his head frantically, knowing what a punch from Jino meant. Ignoring his pleas, Jino raised his fist, eyes blank. Remember, in the next life, don't mess with the Luthors. Well, actually, the point of this plot is the growth process of the protagonist and Clark. From chapter 30, it has been foreshadowing the conflict between the protagonist and Clark. One is decisive and decisive, the other is innocent and kind, and then uses the disaster caused by Clark in the factory incident to ignite explosive barrel. Uses the conflict between two people to completely break out to promote the change and growth of the character's mentality. After all, it is better to teach people 1,000 words than to teach them once. Today's 4 chapters are completed. Over. Chapter 68. I want to make a date with Superman. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Blood and broken bones, teeth and tofu, like a painter's splash of color, a graffiti artist's impromptu tag, scattered throughout the elevator, they formed a grotesque tableau, a portrait of death. Lex expressionlessly flicked a piece of flesh from his black suit. He tried to remain calm, but his pale cheeks and bobbing Adam's apple betrayed his nausea. Watching a person's head explode was a nightmare, a kind of torture. Jino. Lex spoke with difficulty, glaring. Next time, don't kill anyone in front of me. Mr. Lie's such a softie. Hates seeing people die. Jino didn't respond. Instead, he pried open the elevator doors. He jumped down the elevator shaft from the 2nd floor, then burst into the elevator car. The delicate machine clearly couldn't withstand that kind of abuse, and it was now out of commission, forcing the iron doors open. The electronic display above flashed one. With a screech of tortured steel, the elevator doors parted, and Jino and Lex stepped out. Jino. Clark stood waiting on the 1st floor, a sheepish grin on his face, clearly guilty about the mess. When he caught sight of the carnage inside the elevator, his smile froze. The awkward expression remained, but Clark stood there, paralyzed. Even in the summer heat, his limbs felt cold. He was stunned by the scene. This was Clark's first brush with death's gruesome reality. Not long ago, after Earl had kidnapped Lex, Clark's healing factor had kicked in, restoring him to full strength. His only thought had been, stop Earl. But when he'd used his clairvoyance to catch up with the elevator, he'd seen, a blood-soaked elevator, a headless corpse. Horrific images flooded his mind. The reality was far different from what he'd imagined. Poor Earl, the guy who taught him songs as a kid, was now a headless corpse, the raw, bloody stump of his neck exposed. The frozen arm and broken elevator told Clark everything. Jino had ripped open the elevator, used his ice powers to restrain Earl, and then punched the guy's head off, and with Clark's overactive imagination, he could easily reconstruct the scene. His brain just couldn't handle the gore. Puke! Clark's stomach churned, and he instinctively vomited onto the floor. Why hadn't Jino stopped Earl some other way? Clark couldn't understand why he had to kill the poor guy. How can you be so calm? Clark glared at Jino, his eyes accusing him. Jino shrugged. What do you want me to do? Hold a pity party? I don't think I did anything wrong. Jino sneered, flicking blood from his hand. Besides, what gives you the right to question me? If I'm not mistaken, that crazy guy was hiding out at your place last night, wasn't he? Jino's voice sharpened. And you probably helped him bypass company security. See what you did? You brought a nutcase with serious mental issues into a dangerous chemical plant. Jino stepped forward, putting one hand behind his back and gesturing with the other towards the elevator. That crazy guy pointed a gun at my brother, all because he was chasing some myth about the third floor. You endangered everyone, thinking you could control the situation. You screwed it up and lived like Hamlet in contradiction. Did you even think about what would have happened if Earl didn't get what he wanted? Jino retracted his right hand, extending his index finger and thumb, making a shooting gesture at his own temple. Bang! Jino spat out the word. He glared at Clark. My brother would be dead, and it would all be on you. But he didn't shoot. Clark stood, fighting down the urge to vomit. Jino scoffed. I stopped it before it happened. Clark took a deep breath, clenching his fists. So that's your justification for killing anyone you want? His death is on you, Clark. Jino said, each word distinct. You could have asked for my help. But you didn't. You chose to believe Earl's story. In your eyes, that guy was more trustworthy than me. So, you treated Earl with your choice, and I'll treat him with mine. Jino looked at Clark, his blue eyes scanning Clark's flushed face. Remember when we talked about justice? I said I won't let anyone hurt my family and friends. He threatened my family, my brother, and he deserved to die. Jino snapped out of his memories, becoming fiercer, towering over Clark. Now, you're acting like some saint, telling me not to kill. Even if that person might take the lives of my loved ones, you want me to stand by and watch. Clark, Jino's voice grew louder, if someone was holding your parents at gunpoint, would you be saying the same righteous crap? Jino didn't need to guess. If Martha was really held at gunpoint, he'd do exactly the same. Clark was speechless, reliving the scene of Martha's kidnapping. Heat flared in his cheeks, and he couldn't speak. If his loved ones were kidnapped, he would be just as angry, and maybe make the same choice. So. Jino sighed, looking at Clark. Your double standards are a joke. The words hung in the air, shame turned into anger. Lies don't hurt, but the truth cuts like a knife. Jino's words stung. Clark's chest heaved, his breathing ragged. Yeah, Jino. Clark snapped, yelling. You're always right, and you always have some reason to justify it. But Earl was my friend, and you killed him. Jino chuckled derisively, looking at Clark with a hint of challenge. Because he deserved it. See what he did? He broke into a fertilizer plant filled with tons of ammonium nitrate, armed with a gun. If that thing went off, half the town would be gone. I did the right thing. Everyone's lives were in his hands. If he doesn't die, who will? Jino glared. You want to take the fall for him? Clark was speechless, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Pride kept Clark from admitting he was wrong. Jino didn't care. He pointed at Clark's eyes. Look at those bloodshot eyes. What's wrong? He smirked, raising a fist. You want to fight me? You want to use violence to make me accept your childish, ridiculous worldview. Thanks to Ash and Fall for the 500-point reward. Thank you guys. P.S. I have been reading Gotham comics recently, looking for some interesting material, and mature readers should learn to recommend some interesting comics or animations to the author on their own. Beep quietly. Forget about the movie, except for director Ja. Warner executives, they are just a bunch of idiots who are just trying to make money. They have to imitate Marvel's popcorn style. Are DC superheroes popcorn style? Warner, you don't understand. What does Dong Xiaoqian do to make money? The director of the factory shows his face with emoticons. Chapter 69 The Battle Between Supermen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Anger is a powerful emotion, it fuels courage and turns cowards into raging forces. It's like a wild beast lurking in the heart, needing only a word, a look, or an action to awaken it. Inside a small, one-story building, in a lobby that once welcomed guests, stood 3 people and a corpse. Lex, ever the opportunist, was already slipping towards the emergency exit, planning a contingency with Bizarro. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't care. Jino and Clark locked eyes. Their focus solely on each other, there was no mistaking the tension, each knew the other's strength. And each knew who the real opponent was. Clark, Jino began, his hands relaxed at his sides, betraying no nervousness. He even had time for a little chat. You think I'm lecturing you, but have you ever considered this? Jino raised his arm, slowly clenching his fist, air hissed between his fingers, a consequence of the speed. He finished what he had started. I'm just being honest. Jino's words were like a punch to Clark's gut. His hands trembled with rage. So, you've always seen me as a fool, reckless, ignorant, impulsive, right? Jino didn't reply, but his eyes swept over Clark, filled with pity, as if silently saying, yeah, basically. And on top of that, you think challenging me is incredibly dumb. Jino gestured to himself, a self-deprecating smirk on his face. I started riding horses at 6, and from 7 to 9, I was trained by Ms. Siwa, the best combat instructor on the planet. I've had the best teachers, the best advantages. I'm even willing to forego my freezing sight to fight you. You're only going to lose. Jino remained calm, collected. Why would a Kryptonian need to learn martial arts? Because Jino knew that General Zod and his band of Kryptonian criminals were coming to Earth. He'd been planning for the future since he was a kid, never letting up. Jino understood that when everyone has the same superpowers, the only thing left to compete with is hard work. He stood tall, chin up, like a medieval nobleman, and asked, so, what's it going to be, Clark? Ugh. Clark glanced down, his gaze brushing past Earl's headless body, and his simmering anger boiled over. I'm going to beat you down. Clark roared. With a surge of power, Clark moved like lightning, charging at Jino. He swung a right fist, aiming for Jino's cheek, but Jino simply tilted his head, dodging the blow. Just as he predicted, when the powers are the same, combat experience is what counts. Ms. Siwa knocked me on my ass 100 times in my first class. And believe me, my reflexes weren't slow then, but she still took me down. The beating I endured taught me invaluable fighting skills. I can practically predict your next move just by watching your feet. Jino easily evaded the punch, his body and legs working together to slip past Clark's attack. If you zoomed out and slowed it down, it'd look like a lopsided boxing match, like a rookie throwing punches at a seasoned pro. Ha! Clark kept swinging. At normal speed, their fight was just 2 blurs constantly tangling, panting. Clark clenched his teeth, sweat dripping down his face. Hundreds of swings had exhausted him. The physical strain was manageable, but he couldn't handle Jino's effortless defense. Jino just kept dodging his all-out assault. It seemed to confirm what Jino said, you don't stand a chance. Another powerful swing was easily avoided. Frustrated, Clark yelled, are you just going to dodge? Jino sighed, tilting his head again to avoid Clark's straight right to the face. He said flatly, you asked for it. Before he finished speaking, Jino stopped dodging. His feet planted, his hands, previously behind his back, shot out. Snap! One arm locked onto Clark's. With a sudden yank, Jino pulled. A surge of power ripped through Clark, leaving him no time to react. Seeing Clark stumble towards him, panic flashing across his face, Jino didn't hesitate. He brought his right knee up with brutal force. Bang! The knee slammed into Clark's stomach. The pain made Clark double over like a shrimp, but Jino didn't let up. He raised his elbow and smashed it down on Clark's back. Bang! Another blow landed squarely, driving Clark to his knees. The rapid-fire attacks were a polished combination, leaving Clark no chance to recover. Jino grabbed Clark's arm again and threw him over his shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. Thump! Clark, who had been on the offensive just moments ago, now lay sprawled on the floor, staring at the ceiling, confusion and shame in his eyes. Just like Jino said, he'd lost, in speed, strength, and reaction time, Jino was far superior. Seeing Clark sprawled out, defeated, Jino showed no mercy. He raised a fist and hammered it down on Clark's cheek. "What did you think was going to happen?" he growled. The punch landed with tremendous force, like a hammer blow to Clark's handsome face. Blood streamed from Clark's nostrils. He'd never felt so humiliated. "How long are you going to grow for?" Another punch landed, blurring Clark's vision. Everything swam before his eyes were swollen, his ears were ringing. He thought he saw 3 Jinos, all swinging at him. "To grow!" Jino's shout echoed in Clark's ears. He saw the raised fist, knew the power it held. One more punch, and it was over. Clark watched the fist descend, barely missing his cheek as it shattered the concrete floor beside his head, leaving a massive crater. "That's for Lex." Clark heard Jino's voice, laced with mockery. "You survived. Thank Lex for that. That thing saved your life." Ignoring Clark, who lay bleeding on the ground, Jino rubbed his knuckles, then stood up. "We're done, Clark," he said, walking away. Chapter 70 Beautiful Sister-in-Law. Additional update. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The hospital room reeked of disinfectant. Clark woke up groggily. The throbbing in his head was a harsh reminder that everything that had happened was real. "Hey, you awake?" Lana's voice cut through the haze. She was holding an apple, deftly peeling it with a paring knife. Her big eyes were filled with worry. "You were so reckless." Clark was silent. He was in the hospital, but what happened? "What happened?" he asked. Lana fiddled with the knife, her eyes wide as she explained. "Luthor chemical plant called the cops. They said the prisoner got agitated and shot up the elevator. Then he lost control and fell from way up high, cracked his head open. Everyone's okay now, except you've got a little head wound." Clark listened to Lana's explanation in silence. Jino must have taken care of everything. The Luthors always were smart and cunning. "Your aunt and uncle were here taking care of you. Aunt Martha went back to the farm to make you dinner. She left me here to keep an eye on you." "But how did I get hurt?" Lana offered him the apple. She'd seen what Jino and Clark could do. Both of them had powers, but she wasn't sure what could hurt Clark. Clark pursed his lips. He pushed himself up in bed, wincing. Meeting her gaze, he hesitated, then told Lana what had happened with Jino. "Oh my God!" Lana gasped, covering her mouth. "That's insane, to blow a guy's head off with one punch." She couldn't even picture it. "You think what Jino did was wrong, too, right?" Clark asked, his eyes pleading for confirmation, but to his surprise, Lana shook her head thoughtfully. "No, Clark," she said. "If I were Jino, I'd probably do whatever it takes to stop a killer. It's the best thing for everyone." She glanced at Clark cautiously, then gestured with her fingers. "Sometimes you need to be tougher." Clark didn't reply. He just stared at his hands. Even Lana thought he was wrong. He looked out the window, confused. In the sunset light, birds perched in a big tree, chirping to each other. Clark knew he'd lost his friend, Jino. Meanwhile, back at Luthor Castle, the maids in the hall bowed as the young heir passed. Their eyes met, a silent agreement that Jino was in a foul mood. "Yeah," he mumbled. He nodded curtly, grabbed the glass of milk from a blonde maid, and drained it in one gulp. He sighed, then flopped onto the sofa, closing his eyes. Too much had happened that day. He was mentally exhausted. A faint scent of perfume wafted into his nostrils. Then, he felt arms wrap around him from behind, soft hands pressing against his chest. They trailed downwards. Snap, star. Jino opened his eyes and gently pulled the mischievous hands away. The TV screen showed a woman in a black dress hugging a man on a show, her expression seductive. "I'll give you 3 seconds to let go," Jino said, his face expressionless. The coldness in his voice made the woman flinch. She instinctively let go, running her hands over her arms, surprised. Why was she obeying some kid? But the woman quickly composed herself. She tossed her long blonde hair and gave Jino a sultry look. She parted her red lips, revealing white teeth, and stared at him with wide eyes. She swayed her hips as she sat next to him on the sofa, her voice dropped, trying to create a sensual atmosphere. "I didn't expect you to be so unwelcoming." Jino ignored her. He picked up his milk and took another sip, glancing at her with a sneer. "Victoria, what do you have that deserves my respect? A stupid woman who's got nothing but looks and uses them to get what she wants." That he didn't bother hiding his disdain. He stared at the woman, whose face had gone pale. "I don't care if Lionel sent you to test Lex, or if the Harveys sent you to steal business secrets. That's between you and Lex. Don't try to mess with me. I'm not interested in business." With the power of a god, why would he care about money? He stood up without another word and went to his room. He lay on his bed inside. Victoria's file flashed through his mind. Her name was Victoria Harvey. The Harvey family had always been rivals of the Luthors. Her sudden arrival likely meant a new round of tests for Lex, orchestrated either by the Harveys or by Lionel. It was a classic honeypot, designed to see if the future heir could resist temptation. But these people are underestimating Lex, Jino thought. A smile played on his lips. He was ready to watch Lex outsmart these idiots. Over at the Smallville Police Department, the officers stood in a line in the evidence room, like soldiers on parade. The reason? A heavy-set black woman in a suit and tie stood before them. Rumor had it she was a big shot from the White House, a veteran of the FBI and CIA. In a small town, hundreds of people die every year for all kinds of weird reasons, Amanda said, staring at the photos on the wall. Mummified corpses, an electrocuted mechanic, the headless body from the Luthor factory. These strange events were what drew her to Smallville. Amanda picked up the documents and flipped through them. Her sharp mind quickly concluded that the reports were full of holes. "No way did an elevator falling on someone's head cause this," she said, looking at the bloody photo. "Looks more like a point-blank shot with a Barrett." She picked up the missing Julie file, her expression thoughtful. The day before Julie disappeared, a man died in town after losing almost all of his body fat. These disappearances are concentrated at Smallville High, or they're connected to Luthor Chemical Plant, Amanda murmured to herself. She looked at the files, her eyes gleaming. As a go-between for big shots in the White House, she knew the world wasn't as simple as it seemed. She'd been assigned to investigate the strange events in Smallville over the past few years. Her brown eyes flicked to the Luthor factory file, a smirk on her face. "Let's start with this.